I'd like to call to order the Bristol, Virginia City Council November 14th, 2017 meeting. At this time, we'll take a moment of silence. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Looks like we got a full house tonight. We've got a set of Virginia High Bearcats look like from wall to wall. That's a good sign. This team here tonight's done a tremendous job, and we're going to have some recognition for them here in just a second. Before that, I'd just like to say I appreciate everyone coming out. I think it's important that everybody come to these meetings. I think it's important that everybody hears what's going on in your city. I want to make sure that this community gets involved. I do want to apologize personally. Last meeting, I thought that we got a little too emotional on topics. I think that it's okay to debate stuff, but we need to stay above board and be professional. So I ask everybody up here and in the audience, let's keep it that way. I think it's a lot more productive that way. We're not going to agree, but we can at least agree to disagree and move on. So with that said, again, thank everybody for coming. See if the council members have any comments.
Mr. Mayor, first of all, I'd like to welcome the young people from Virginia High, cheerleaders, and especially this football team. Outstanding year. Coaches, you've done a heck of a job. Families, parents, you've done a heck of a job. And the reality is, you may not know this, you may not even think about it, but especially you football players, there's some 6 to 8 year old young man in the backyard of his house. He's throwing a football. He's emulating the quarterback of Virginia High School. And he's catching a pass and he's emulating the guy that's the receiver or the running back. So your role models. Your role models. You know, Bristol, Virginia has had some tough squeezes. But you know what? You are the backbone. You continue throughout your life to be the role models you are now. You'll make Bristol, or wherever you may live, a much better place. I'm so tickled that you're all here tonight. I wish I could tell you that I watched every football game this year, but when you get my age, it's tough to get in and out of Bearcat Stadium and so forth and so on. But I watched you, and I've had a lot of 90-year-olds, 80-year-olds tell me, hey, I didn't get to see the football game, but wow, they're doing well. And in my work, I travel up and down the I-81 corridor. And Coach Chris and your staff, I want to tell you this is, and it also to the families of your players and so forth. You know what I hear, and that's, besides your competitiveness and your abilities, I hear the sportsmanship that your football team and your young players, you know, present on the football field, win or lose. That makes you feel good. In life, you know, we don't always win. We lose sometimes. But what you all have presented to Southwest Virginia, to the city of Bristol, Virginia, and throughout, I can't be proud enough. Thank you for what you've done, and thank you for what you'll continue to do as citizens and residents of the city of Bristol, Virginia, as football players and cheerleaders and band members and so forth and so on, and family. You're a blessing. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for Bristol. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Said it all.
I just,
Very good.
yeah. I just want to say congratulations on a good season. I think I saw every home game, and I will say that the regular season game against Marion was one of the best high school football games I think I've watched in a very long time. Y'all should be very proud. of what you've accomplished this year.
So the last thing I'll say, I played football at Virginia High, and I don't take anything away from you guys, but you know what? You get out of what you put into practice. You get out of life what you put into life. So you need to take this year as a life lesson, because you need to work hard every single moment. So if you work hard at practice every single moment, at the end of the day, you're going to win the game. So you get out of it what you put into it. So that's what you get out of this. Savor this year. Very few teams at Virginia High can walk away and say they had a winning record and went to playoffs. I mean, we could count them on one hand. So you're an elite group just to have made it to the playoffs. And so it'll be talked about for a long time in this community about this team. So remember these memories, but take away the lessons. These coaches, you'll remember these coaches forever. So you're learning about life right now in this season. And you guys have done well. And the girls and gals that have supported the team and the parents have done well. So continue that on. Don't stop. It just starts here, okay? So with that, we've got a proclamation I'm going to read. The formality is, whereas the Virginia High School Bearcat football team finished the 2016 regular season with a 3-7 record, and whereas Coach Michael Christ and the Virginia High football coaching staff challenged the returning players to work hard in the offseason as a team in order to improve. And whereas the Virginia High School Bearcat football team accepted that challenge by working hard in the weight room, on the practice field, and in the classroom, and whereas the Virginia High football team came together as a result of a common goal and a family atmosphere, and whereas Virginia High School football team began the regular season with a huge win against Tazewell by a score of 35-0, and whereas the Virginia High School football team earned a signature win week 6 against 3A Abingdon, and whereas the Virginia High football team later in the season beat an undefeated 8-0 team from Marion, and whereas the Virginia High School defense held their opponents to an average of 17 points per game, and whereas the Virginia High football team scored 55 points against Lebanon and has scored at least 30 in a game on 6 occasions, and whereas the Virginia special teams unit has blocked 6 kicks and scored 4 touchdowns, and whereas the Virginia High football team finished the regular season of 2017 with a record of 7-3, and whereas the Virginia High football team earned a home playoff berth for the first time since 2002, and whereas the Virginia High School football team has played with tremendous grit, sportsmanship, and class, and whereas the Virginia High football team has brought great pride to our city, and the successful season is a testament to the hard work and skill of the athletes, and the leadership of the coaches and the staff, and the enthusiastic support of the entire Virginia High School community. And now, therefore, the City Council of Bristol, Virginia extends a proclamation to recognize and congratulate the 2017 Virginia High School Bearcat football team this 14th day of November 2017.
Amen.
Obviously, we accept this with a great amount of pride, very humble. The team accepts this. I think if you look at our on-the-field success, it was really just a culmination of a lot of hard work from these players year-round, these assistant coaches year-round, and that success was just a product of those efforts. I echo those statements and feel very proud of this group of young men that we're certainly in good hands with years to come if they continue to work and fight like they have all year. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move into the regular agenda items tonight.
Mr. Umpire, if you don't, we're gonna head out, we don't mean to be rude, but they've got pizza waiting.
Okay.
Wait a minute, you mean they're not for us?
Run. All right. Thank you. Thank
ya.
you. Thanks, kid. Thanks, guys and girls. Mr. Mayor, if we don't move executive session up, I can't take much more. I'll be honest with you.
We'll just move down it, leave when you need
I mean,
to.
I'm not going to sit here and listen to the same discussion over and over again.
Big turnout.
Thank you, Mr. Fleener. Thanks for inviting us, but we want y'all to know you're getting your money's worth. This is
Hey, they're
local
great.
tax dollars at work.
They're great kids.
They are
They
great
really
kids.
are, and thank you for bringing everybody here tonight.
Thank you very much.
You mean you didn't order extra pizza?
If y'all get done within an hour,
An hour.
Catherine, good to see you here tonight. I didn't know you had a kid playing or whatever, but good to see you. Okay? Yes.
All right, we'll move on to regular agenda items. We should be able to move through this expeditiously. Let's, number one, consider an agreement between the City of Bristol, Virginia and Washington County for animal shelter services. Staff report.
Sure, Council, as you all are well aware, I've been working on an animal shelter resolution for the past several months, and it has come time for us to make a move which is going to require us to build an animal shelter. We have exhausted numerous veterinarians, numerous other localities in order to find a solution to our animal shelter problem without any success. I've mentioned to several of you this past week that there might have been an opportunity with a neighboring locality. However, we do not believe that that neighboring locality would meet the state requirements set by the state of Virginia. So with that being said, what I've worked on was a temporary agreement with Washington County, Virginia, and that agreement will allow us to place 5 dogs and 10 cats at their facility. And basically what it will cost us is $300 per month for a fee in order to house those animals there. And then there will also be an expense for some veterinary services if it's required. And that's not your typical veterinary services. That's like if it's an emergency type situation. However, Washington County will let us know prior to calling the veterinarian to see if we want to proceed with any sort of veterinary care for certain types of animals. This agreement will last for 4 months, and we do have the opportunity to extend that agreement, but we hope that we're far enough along in the building of our new animal shelter that we will not need to extend that agreement.
Mr. Eads, it's one thing to have a building. What are we going to do as far as veterinarian services for the animals that we have? I mean, is that, I can't imagine that fee and so forth and so on is going to actually take care of veterinarian services, even if we build a shelter. What are you going to do about that? We're just going to kill them after so long? Is that the plan?
They're going to follow the state code. So it's just like our animal shelter here. If the animal if it meets certain criteria, it's eligible to be euthanized after 5 days. If there's other criteria, it's after 7 days. So there is criteria that allows for euthanasia. And if the animal's not picked up within that time period, it is eligible to be euthanized.
Well, the bottom line is, why have a shelter? Why not just put them in the back of a building and start the clock ticking and just, get the shot ready? I mean, to me, that's what it, and we can save a lot of money if that's the goal, is to save money.
Well, I don't think the goal is to save money. I mean, even when we build our own animal shelter, we're still going to follow the state code. Unless council directs me otherwise, it's not going to be a no-kill shelter. In order to have a no-kill shelter, you're going to have potentially 50 to 100 dogs at any given time, and maybe more cats. And that comes with an expense with taking care of those animals. So until I hear otherwise from council, it's going to be a standard animal shelter that would euthanize animals after a certain period of time.
I don't see anybody signed up for public comment on this. So do I have a council motion on this item?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we authorize our city manager to enter into this 4-month agreement with Washington County for taking care of up to 5 dogs and 10 cats.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, call the roll.
Fleener.
No.
Hartley.
Yes.
Hubbard.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. All right, consent agenda. We can either go down through this consent agenda or we can approve it as written, unless there's any objections.
Approve as written,
I-
Mr. Mayor.
I would make one correction on the item, the 28th Judicial District Judicial and Domestic Relations Court Clerk. I believe the second line there should say revenue instead of expenditure.
Yeah, account 3-001-23
Yes.
010-0010.
Okay. With that one correction, expenditure to revenue, is that okay with
Second
council?
the motion to
Second the motion to
approve.
approve as written?
With the amendment.
With the
With the
amendment.
yes. So with the amendment of revenue instead of expenditure under the 28th District Judicial, we got a motion and a second. Call the roll.
Fleener.
Yes.
Hartley.
Yes.
Hubbard.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. Okay, we're on to council discussions. Debt restructuring.
Council, before we get into the debt restructuring section, I want to go, which this relates to our debt restructuring. This is a financial information update that council has not had in some time, so it's time that council kind of knows where we're at least year to date as of September 30th of 2017. Here's our fund summary. Our general fund, we have revenues of $9.3 million, expenditures of $13.6 million. Our balance at this point is $4.3 million to the negative. However, that's normally where we're at as a city due to when our taxes are collected. We expect that balance will come closer to zero here in the next couple of weeks as real estate taxes are collected. And as of today, we have an approximately $2 million cash balance. Our solid waste disposal fund is running in the negative right now to the tune of $500,000. You can see we have a revenue of $1.78 million, expenditures of $2.28 million. What needs to happen probably at the next council meeting is a transfer of funds. The difference, what you see, is a $700,000 difference where we just paid off the liner for the landfill. So once we add that transfer over, we would be operating, the solid waste disposal fund be operating $200,000 to the good. Our capital fund project, we have revenues of $774,000 and expenditures of $774,000. Here's our general fund revenue summary. 43% of our revenue is coming from local sources. 46% is coming from the Commonwealth. 10% is from the federal government, and the 1% there is the $50,000 that we had to do on the drawdown on the TAN in order to activate the TAN. We turned around and immediately paid that TAN off. I think it was within a week, so that was that 1%. Our general fund expense summary, this breaks it down as to how we're spending our money as a city. Public safety equates to 22.75% of our expenses. Education is 18.78%. Health and welfare social services is 12.38%. Transfers, this is to the solid waste, IDA, and capital projects, has been 10.26%. Our debt service payments been 10% of our expenses. Public works is at 7.86%. Parks and rec is 5.15%. Non-departmental, which would include transit, is at 4.69%. Government administrations 4.16%. Judicial administrations 2.58%, and community development is 1.32%. We'll go into some revenue comparisons now. The yellow is our most current year. And you can see, if you look at fiscal year 15, 16, and 17, we have more revenues than we did in 17, but we're a little bit lower than we were in 15 and 16 for our local sales and use tax. Our consumer utility tax is staying about the same as it always has over the past several years to this point. Here we have our taxes on recordation of wills on the far left. You can see that this year we are quite a bit higher than what we were in the previous years, but that's due to a recordation fee of approximately $45,000 that occurred in September, I believe, that we normally would not have. It was a fairly big fee. Our cigarette taxes, it's down as of compared to last year. However, we're still on par with what it was for 2016. Our lodging taxes have increased, and you can see a steady increase in our lodging taxes the past 3 years. So that's a good sign. It appears that more people are coming to Bristol and spending their money and staying the night here. Our restaurant meals tax is a little bit misleading. It's not misleading in the fact that our restaurant and meals tax has decreased over the past 3 years. However, we did make a budget adjustment this past year of $545,000. And based on that budget adjustment, we are above where we need to be for our restaurant and meals taxes to date. So with that budget adjustment, we shouldn't run into any shortfall based on a lack of restaurant and meals tax. Here are some graphs so you can see how we've compared over the past several years through each month. You can see 2017, our local sales and use tax, we're above 2017, but we're below 15 and 16. Our lodging tax, it looks like 2017 was somewhat of an anomaly. What we believe there was a double payment in August of that year that caused that to increase significantly. It's not normal, it hasn't followed the trends, but as you can see, once you get past August, how everything trends, I anticipate that trend to continue as we enter into the winter months, and then as spring rolls around and the spring races and summer vacations, we'll see that lodging tax increase as it has in the previous years. Restaurant meal tax, as I previously stated, we are below where we would normally be. This is, but it's something that we budgeted for this past budget cycle. So I think when you all adjusted the budget, I think you all did the right thing. We're not expecting more than what we're getting, and actually right now we're getting more than what we expected. Our cigarette taxes, as I stated, it's basically following the same line that we have followed in years past. It appears 2017 was a little bit of an aberration, but everything seems to trend very similar as it has in years past. We don't anticipate having a drop off in revenue of cigarette tax over the long run. Our consumer utility tax, it's a little bit higher than in the previous years. As you can see here, how the taxes over from December through June somewhat decreased, and we're on an increase right now, and we anticipate it to follow the same line as it has in years past. Our admission taxes, you will see the spike in September, October. That's typically from the Rhythm and Roots. We anticipate once we update this, after we close out the month of October, we will see an increase in this as well, and then we'll probably follow the same type of admission tax revenue as we have in the past years. Is there any questions? I do have some details. If y'all have any questions, I can answer any detail in relation to that.
The only question I'd ask you, Mr. Eads, you know, we've cut the budget for the Convention and Visitors Bureau by $75,000 in fiscal 17-18. And it looks to me like we have lost nothing, even though it was proclaimed that we would drastically lose. But in the first quarter, since we've started fiscal 17-18, we're on track exactly where we were in the past. Is that accurate?
For lodging taxes?
Well, meals, lodging, whatever.
Well, our meals are down. You can see.
But our lodging's not.
Our lodging is not, but our meal tax is down. And you know, I think we've got several things that we need to be concerned about with our meals tax. You've had several restaurants closed at Exit 7.
Right.
A lot of that is due to the fact that Alpha Natural Resources At least that's what I'm attributing it to. We had a big lunch crowd. A lot of those restaurants relied on that lunch crowd. When they shut down and their employees left, those restaurants in the Exit 7 area do not have the ability, or they didn't have the clientele that they used to have. So I think that's why we saw a lot of those restaurants shut down. So that does concern me, but however, with those restaurants shutting down, we have Taco John's that has opened up. We've got another potential for another restaurant coming in as well here in the downtown Bristol area. We have the new hotel that will be opening in June of 18 that will have a restaurant involved. So we do have restaurants that are coming in, and we'll be making up some of that lost dollar, but to speculate as to how much lost dollars we would receive from these, or make up from these new restaurants, I wouldn't know.
Well, but to answer the question, the answer is no, it hasn't been a loss of lodging at all and so forth.
Well, our lodging taxes, I mean, you know, the numbers are the numbers. Our lodging taxes have increased.
Okay.
And our restaurant meal taxes decreased. So I don't know what you would relate that to. It seems to be, to me, it would make sense if lodging increases, so would the restaurant meal tax. But it may be that there's not enough restaurants for people to choose from to eat. I'm not exactly sure, but to me, you would think they would follow the same line, but right now they're not.
Well, maybe because Bristol, Virginia meals cost more than going to Bristol, Tennessee, and so forth and so on. I mean, with the tax and the meals tax and so forth, realistically, Bristol, Virginia, you can spend the money for gasoline to go to the Pinnacle or so forth and so on, and come out just as well, right? I mean, we're high on meals tax in this city.
The biggest problem is, was pointed out, Alpha, that's 200 meals a day that disappeared.
Correct.
That's a lot of revenue when you add that every day for 365 days,
Well,
or, you know, 280,
adds
whatever.
Well, you can also add BVU that used to have it on the dime at BVU to go pay anything at Exit 7. I mean, if you want to go there, we can go there, Mr. Hubbard. I mean, you know, we can always, you know, snow something over and so forth and so
Well,
on.
that's not snow, it's just numbers. That's
Well-
how many employees were in that building, they're not there
I think
now.
the point is this, though. I think the point, he's making a good point. The point is
Yeah.
this, you know, we cut back on the visitor bureau, right? So, and people would speculate when you cut back on your advertising funds, right? You potentially would expect your revenues to go down because of it. So you got to be careful. You got to monitor when you cut back on advertising like that. Is that really what we're seeing? Now, I would say, I don't know. We've got enough data yet. I mean, you know, there's a lag between, you know, changing something that's normal before you really see that. So you got to kind of let it go for a little while because we haven't gone through enough seasons, because lodging and meals, a lot of this stuff is a seasonal business. You know, it goes up in the warmer months and it goes down in the winter months, and it's hard to gauge it unless you see a whole year, you know, picture. So, but we're going to watch it. The point is, we've got to watch it, because the city shouldn't be spending money on advertising for any organization that's not going to deliver the revenue and tax back to us. I mean, that's the whole reason of doing it. I think we need to focus the revenues more, though. I think we need to focus where we spend that money.
Well, if we're ahead of the game in lodging and we come around next year, even though we've got people that want to, you know, obviously push for Convention and Visitors Bureau, it's cheaper to have them do it than it is ourselves. Realistically, if this trend continues as far as lodging is concerned, it means to me, and, you know, objective evidence would be that people stop in Bristol because they look on their Google map and they say there's a hotel here and there's a hotel there, and so forth and so on. And we need to even cut further the $100,000, because why spend money to employ people at a Chamber of Commerce when realistically, you know, tourism is this, that. Tourism is people stopping to the side of the road and getting a hotel, period. And if we're ahead of that game in lodging, then we're going to take, and you're right, we need more empirical data. I agree with that. But if we get more empirical data, and, you know, we've got to realize, too, that Outback closed. Why did Outback close? Why did Ruby Tuesdays close? Because we charge too much for meals tax. In this city, we gouge the consumer. In this city, we're not competitive with Bristol, Tennessee even with their sales tax being higher. You can argue all you want, you can fluff it all you want, but that's the reality. And if you push cigarette tax much higher, although it's down, you know, what's somebody not to go to Bobby's Market right outside Washington County to get their cigarettes? That's what I would do. That's what I do for my tobacco, my skull. It's cheaper than buying in the city of Bristol, Virginia. Probably 75 cents per cigarette pack higher. So, you know, we can continue to gouge people. I mean, the derelict that goes into the Chevron or wherever and gets a pack of cigarettes doesn't care. But the consumer that's worried about their budget and has a budget, they care. But, you know, we've had councils in the past that make up the deficits by squeezing the consumer. Period. Okay? And it's a lose-lose situation if you don't stop gouging the consumer. Real estate taxes is one thing, raising, but, you know, enjoyment and what do you call it, entertainment taxes are just as important. I mean, I'd rather go to Blue Circle in Bristol, Tennessee and get a hamburger and pay, it's cheaper and as good than I would go somewhere in Bristol, Virginia and pay more. It makes no sense.
I mean, the point's valid. I mean, that's the way you do an empirical business study, right? Because there is some logic to, you know, you run the tax rate up and then people start to decide based on, you know, what the tax rate is. And I'll tell you, there's been more than one person mention it to me that, you know, if they've got a big entourage of business people coming in, because the rate's so high on the Virginia side, a lot of times they'll decide to take them on the Tennessee side because they're taking 8 or 10 people out, you know, to dinner. So there is some truth to that. I just don't know how big it is and to what depth it is. But you got to be careful getting your tax rates up too high and making you non-competitive.
Well, I think one thing that we don't need to jump to conclusions yet. Let's look at the empirical data over the year. And then the other thing that I would encourage business owners to consider that are considering opening a restaurant in the city of Bristol, consider Bristol, Virginia. We do need a more diverse eateries in the city, and I think that would potentially help as well. So we have opportunities for business people to come in, and there's a Pizza Hut that's empty, a Ruby Tuesdays that's empty. They can come in and maybe do some sort of new style restaurant that we haven't had anywhere in the local area that could also increase. So there's several different factors we need to consider before we jump to conclusions based on 3 months.
I think we need to
worth of
engage
data.
the business. I mean, we need to talk to the hotel folks. We need to talk to the restaurant folks, right? I mean, they're in that business, right? They know what drives their business. And I'll tell you, traveling a lot, you know, there's a lot of times people come from out of town, they will use their phone to figure out where they're going to go eat. That's just what they do nowadays. So they don't read a magazine or a travel magazine. It's all on the phone now. So if they think that's got value, then we should support, you know, spending some advertising money to help our IT department do it or whatever to get that done, because that can drive business. And that's something when they cross that city line coming down the interstate or northbound, you know, and it comes up, say, hey, go eat here, stay here, you might be surprised how much extra business that'll drive. So we do need to look at that.
I'd rather make less and have more. Realistically, I think you lower the tax, you get more business and so forth and so on, and you become competitive. If you're higher, we have a senior citizen-driven population, and the higher you do the meals tax in this city and so forth and so on, the less you have demand in this city. And people are catching on. They know it's a screw up, unless you're coming through here from wherever and they, you know, you don't have any choice. They don't know until they get the bill and they say, what? So, you know, I'd rather quantity to me over or quality and quantity over, you know, margins and so forth. You know, bigger margins, less people.
Well, I think it's valid points. I think it's something we need to look at in the upcoming budget cycle, and we can analyze it in further detail at that time. For right now, we'll go into the debt restructuring phase. We have discussed this numerous times. I've tried my best to narrow this down into about 4 or 5 different slides. I'll just go ahead and warn you, there are a lot of graphs, a lot of different lines, and a lot of different colors, so you'll just have to bear with me. I wanted to get as much information as I could to you so you could make this decision. Here is our incremental cash requirements. You will see at the top we have scenarios 1, 2, 3, 4, 3A, 3B, 4 with the RFP, another scenario 4 with an RFP closing February 2018, scenario 2 with a closing date of February 1 of 2018, and scenario 3A with an RFP closing date of February 1 of 2018. What you have here are the incremental, if you take scenario 1, 2018-19, the city has to come up with $1.35 million additional dollars to service our debt. In 2019-20, on top of the 1.3, we'd have to come up with an additional 3.8 million. And then in 2020 and 2021, In addition to the 1.3 and the 3.8, we'd have to come up with an additional $56,000. And you can see how this works out throughout each different scenario. I will go from 1 to scenario 4 now. Scenario 4, you can see that we will not have an increase in our debt load for 2018-19. However, in 19-20, we'll have an increase of $996,000. And then in 2021, an additional $647,000. 21-22, an additional $500,000. 22-23, an additional $500,000. And then in 23-24, an additional $500,000. And then our debt levels off at that point. So, and you can also see how scenario 3A, that is refinancing, I believe, the 2007 bonds. I take that back, to 2010 bonds. 3B is refinancing the 2007 bonds. Scenario 4 is based on the new interest rates based on an RFP that Davenport had submitted. So you can see that we will have an extra year of not having to make an additional debt service payment. And it appears the numbers are almost identical as what you see in scenario 4, that is not the RFP scenario, as far as what we would have to come up with if we can close by December 28th. Now, I'd sent out an email earlier today explaining the situation that we're in regards to closing by December 28th. There is a possibility. Davenport's going to use their best efforts to get that closed by that date, and with any scenario, but we are going to be pushed to get that done at this point. We hope to get it done, can't guarantee it. So if you move on over to February 1 closing date, in 2019-20, we just have to come up with an additional $11,000. 2020 and 2021, it jumps to $1.1 million, and then it levels off at $500,000 for the next 3 fiscal years. Scenario 2 requires a increase in debt service of $3.3 million in 2019 and 2020, and in 2021 an additional $400,000 on top of the $3.3 million. Scenario 3A, based on the RFP, with the closing date of February 1, we would need an additional $1.8 million in 2019, 2020, an additional $500,000 the following year. It levels off for 3 years, and then it increases again another $1 million in 2024 and 2025, an additional $300,000 the following year, an additional $5,000 the year after that. So that's our incremental cash requirements on each scenario that Davenport has presented to us. Here's what our total debt service payments would be for each one of these scenarios for the next 10 years. So you can see scenario 1 for the 17-18 budget, we're at $4.5 million. And then in 2018, it increases to 7.5, then 10 million for the next 4 years, decreases down to about 9.7 million, and 10 million again through 2026, 2027. And then it just continues. You can look at how things level out over the course of time in each different scenario. Anyone have any questions about that? Can we leave it up? Or?
Realistically, I don't even know why we're doing this. I mean, if I understand the consensus of council, it's either going to be 4 or it's going to be nothing, okay? I mean, let's be real here. And what we've done is we've gone through all these little rosy scenarios, which is a waste of time. It's either 4 or nothing, period.
I agree.
Okay? That's where we are. So we wasted time talking about scenario 1, 2, 3. 3A, when, you know, we know that that's the same information we've had 3 or 4 times here already.
Well, Mr. Fleener,
that's my opinion, sir. I don't need a comment. That's my opinion.
I presented this since August with, Davenport's been presenting this information since August. Davenport has met with 4 of the 5 council members on numerous occasions in regards to this information. It's important that council sees exactly what the debt service payments are, and to make a choice, because right now is the time to either make a choice to do something or not do something. And I'm going to make a phone call tomorrow morning to Davenport, probably shoot them an email tonight, to let them know the consensus of council as to which way we want to go and whether or not we want to refinance.
Well, let me put it in context too. Let me just put this in context. This council was split up until tonight. There's no doubt about it. Last discussion we had, there was no consensus on which scenario was the right scenario. Some of us were on 4. I was more aggressive. I was back at 2 or 3 to make that work, but under the assumption there was more cash at play that we couldn't talk about in the public domain, that if that worked out for us, we could do scenario 2 or 3. Well, now sitting here tonight, there's been new information presented which isn't going to come to fruition like we thought. So we are now left with, there's really only one option, right? And that's scenario 4. But that was not the case the last council meeting.
Well, we
And
poisoned
so-
the well too, Mr. Mayor. I think we poisoned the well with one of the sources, and when the time comes, we'll expose that. We poisoned the well with a possibility because of input that doesn't have to be and should never have been with this council. So we'll talk about that when the appropriate time comes and why it didn't come to fruition, okay? And, but realistically, you have to agree, Mr. City Manager, you know the consensus of this council before you came here and presented all this stuff tonight. I mean, these are not feasible. 1's not feasible. 2's not feasible. 3 is not feasible. 3A isn't feasible. And like the mayor said, the only thing that's feasible is 4 or nothing.
Well,
And so why do we have this exercise tonight?
Well, I mean,
let me say something. I think it is valuable to let the public see this. I mean,
They've seen it
whether
4 times.
whether we need to see it or not again is something else, right? But we do need to give them a chance to see it because it takes a while to absorb this.
Well, they've
I'll
seen
be
it 4
honest
times,
with you.
Mr.
I get it. We've looked at it several times, but when you're making a really tough decision about what to do with the debt restructuring, the right thing to do is you look at it multiple times to see if anything has changed. Make sure you're making the right decision, right? Hear all the input. So it takes multiple meetings to do that. So you got to have some perseverance through that. But to sit here today, we really only have one option. And so I think we're in unison. It's scenario 4. Now, with that said, everybody needs to understand in the public, none of these scenarios, including 4, does not come free. Those debt loads are well above what we do today. So if things don't happen the way they're supposed to happen over the next several years, like economic growth, growing the top line revenues, to be able to pay those kinds of numbers you see there, it's going to come at the expense of operating cost reductions or tax increases. Because there's only 3 ways to close that gap. And we have roughly a $3 million gap, right? Any way you look at it, that has to be closed one of 3 ways: cost reductions, taxes, or economic growth. So roll up your sleeves and work hard for economic growth, and where we end up is there's going to be hopefully a windfall, but chances are there will be a gap, and we're going to have to understand that as a community. We have to understand there's still a tough wind ahead, and a lot of people are going to forget this conversation. You're going to forget this conversation when we get out into 2022 and 2023. So we need to make sure everybody rewinds and comes back to this meeting and understands it comes with financial gap closure consequences, right? So I think people walked away from some of the meetings thinking, well, scenario 4 was no tax increase. No, that's not true. But I had people say that, so I knew people were confused. So I just say that to make sure we put this in context. Scenario 4 is our only option, in my opinion, right? But it wasn't several weeks ago. So I would propose that council make a recommendation right now on giving the city manager the authority to go forward with scenario 4. And we still do have the ability to, if we do come into some cash and things go well, we have the ability to go and pay down debt on bonds that we have, and we've already laid that out. So we could refinance this and pull it in if things really go our way well over the next 4 to 6 years. So it's not like this is the end of the day and the only thing you got to live with for the next 24 years. So that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm waiting for a council discussion and recommendation for the city manager to take action.
I think it appears there's a consensus. You know, Mr. Fleener is correct in the sense I had talked to one council member. I felt like there was a consensus, but as the mayor has pointed out, it's important that if there's any questions or lingering thoughts that you all need answered, or the public has to see this as well. I thought it was important to put this on there tonight, and I also did it based at the direction of the mayor to provide more detailed information, so that's what I've done.
And since I see one of our developers in the room, I think it's important that our developers in the room know that the community is counting on that developer. And if that developer executes, the pain of this is minimized. If that developer doesn't execute, then we take the brunt of the consequences. So it is what it is, right?
There's more graphs I'll just kind of roll through. That's the revenue increases and where each one of those revenue increases would coming from over the next 10 years. Here's a chart showing those revenues, and the black line is the revenue. You can see even based on the revenues as presented, and there are some assumptions in there that we would not get revenues from certain sources. We do fall behind even on scenario 4, but that is based on a worst case scenario, which I don't think the city of Bristol will suffer, but that is a potential possibility if the falls does not produce as we have expected. And we have assumed in these scenarios that there is no revenue coming from the falls.
And you don't need to go through the rest of the slides. I think we know where we are. So what's the pleasure of council?
I'll make a motion, we move forward with refinancing and structuring with the number 4 option and proceed immediately with Davenport to bring it to an end.
I would second that. Yeah, if at all possible to do this before the end of the year. I realize there may be extenuating circumstances, but that could save us a little bit of extra money if we're able to do that by then.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other council comments? Okay. Call the roll.
Fleener,
Abstain.
Hartley,
Yes.
Hubbard,
Yes.
Wingard,
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. All right, on to forensic audit update.
Council, at direction of council, the city sent out RFP for a legal audit and also for an accounting audit of certain transactions that have occurred within the city since 2010. I want to give you a quick update as to where we're at and to let you all begin thinking about whether or not we want to spend the money that it's going to cost for us to do this. Our legal audit, we have began competitive negotiations with one firm. Depending on the quickness that we want the firm to complete the audit, if it's a 6-month scenario, it will cost the city $115,000. There is a potential that it could be extended due to the fact they don't know how in depth they would have to go, but at that point we could narrow down the scope if it extended beyond 6 months. If it's 3 months, it would cost $125,000. And then with our accounting firm, and I should have said first that each one of these plans contemplate interviews with personnel of the city of Bristol, reviewing and analyzing available project records, bond financing agreements, financial and accounting information, product schedules, leases, and things of that nature. They will continue to interview city personnel and also people who are no longer with the city that would be willing to cooperate with them. They would identify these areas of concerns based on the forensic analysis. They would prepare a forensic accounting analysis and a legal analysis relating to the contracts and expenditures based on certain transactions within the city. They would then prepare a draft, present it to the city attorney, and at that point, depending on what the draft says, we could ask them for a more formal draft that would then be presented to the council and to the public. In regards to the cost for the accounting audit, the total cost is going to be $65,000 for 3 months, and then they suggest, which is $195,000, and then they suggest that we budget in an additional $75,000 just in case it would take them longer than 3 months contemplated to complete the audit. So with that being said, you're looking at an additional $260,000 for a total for the legal and accounting audit of $350,000.
Mr. Eads, we also have a consensus, I think, that you've looked at Outlook as I have. Realistically, with this, I would love nothing more than to do the legal and so forth and so on, but with the situation the city of Bristol's in, restructuring debt and so forth and so on, kicking the can to a certain extent. I have talked about this since July of 2016, of asking the Auditor of Public Accounts, because this is supposed to be a development of regional impact, to come in, and it's a business, it's a governmental agency, it won't cost us anything. All we have to do is get the legislation passed to one of our delegates. I guess it would be Israel O'Quinn as our delegate for this area. Ask him to take this legislation to Richmond, and we get an Auditor of Public Accounts. Now, I grant you it won't be done until July of probably 2018, but it doesn't cost us anything. We have no monies, as much as I would crave to do it, we have no monies at this point in time. If we have to restructure our debt with a gap of $3 million potentially, how in the world can we possibly do a legal and forensic audit? An accounting audit. We can't. And you know that. I think that's the consensus of council. So here we are again, spinning our wheels. People may get by with murder, literally. But, it is what it is. So can we not frame, I'm asking council, can we not frame some legislation to ask our delegate to take it to Richmond and get it on the back of the state to come in here and audit this? They did a heck of a job at BVU, and I commend them to anyone. They have no dog in the hunt. They don't get paid a bunch of swath of money, and we can't afford it. Let's just be real here. We can't afford it. We can't.
Well, and I have no issue doing that, but this was put on my lap in the beginning of July that we were going to do an RFP for legal and forensic accounting audits, and that's what I did. And if I'm not mistaken, there were certain council members that previously said we couldn't afford to do this, and anyway, we went forward with it no matter what. So
Well, now-
these are the numbers.
We know the
And
price now, and
you know
it's
the
too
price.
high, so
Now you put it-
appreciate that.
Now you put the discussion in context again, and now that we went through it, we know the numbers.
We know the numbers,
We know what it's gonna
and-
cost. And so, yes, we don't have the funds to justify this kind of an audit, even though we wanna do an audit to the depth that we're talking about, right? So, if you could go away on the next action item and see if you could draft something for the legislator to do a Virginia APA audit for us, that's a good starting spot. And then maybe that finds something that allows us to justify another step, right?
I'll bring that back at the next council meeting.
I think that's the appropriate thing, and I think it's the only thing given our circumstances, Mr. Mayor.
Everybody agrees to that, right?
Yep.
Yep. All right. Next discussion item is Candy Alley.
Council, just one, I want to update you. I was tasked with finding out if Atmos Energy would do some sort of change either on the gas meter or maybe do something protective in regards to the gas meter there at Candy Alley. I am aware that the owner of the Candy Alley home is here tonight. She will be making some public comments here later, not at this session, but on the appropriate line item of the agenda. So Atmos Energy is willing to place some concrete bullards right there near the corner of the home. I don't believe that's going to alleviate the concerns of the homeowner in regards to people throwing beer bottles at her house, or potentially you can see where cars have ran into that fence or potentially running into her house. But I wanted to update council. We had this discussion in public. I thought it'd be appropriate to update you in public again in regards to that matter. That's all I have to say about Candy Alley.
Okay. No.
And he'll get to you in just a minute.
Can I ask a question? Because I have had quite a few people contact me since I live near there. I believe originally it was supposed to be at this meeting or the next meeting to consider the street closure. And the concern of the citizens is that live in that neighborhood that this has been blocked off and it's no action is being taken. And so, when winter is coming up, and as was discussed at the last meeting, a lot of the ingress and egress into that neighborhood involve hills, and that's the best way in and out, especially during the winter. So I think they're getting very concerned that nothing is happening there.
Why is it blocked? I mean, let me ask you, I mean, I didn't know it was actually blocked at this point in time.
In June,
There's no excuse in that.
in June of this past year, the Transportation Safety Commission recommended that alley be blocked. I think Mr. Hubbard sits on that committee, if I'm not mistaken, and it was recommended that it be blocked. So it came to me in July to sign off based on the Transportation Safety Commission's recommendation that we block it. So based at that time, based on the recommendation of the commission, I signed off to block that, expecting us to move forward with another, some sort of solution. So now we're here first part of November, and we haven't been, there's been several solutions presented. The owner of Candy Alley wants to have her opportunity to speak.
Sure.
She also has the opportunity and the right to petition the council at a future date to close the alley. So depending on what council chooses to do, it may eventually come to you all back on the agenda for a vote whether to close or open that alley. Now, I do have the authority as city manager to reopen that alley, but I think it's important before I do that you all hear the citizen who owns the house who's complaining tonight, and then we can discuss this this week individually to decide what would be the best solution.
I had no idea, Mr. City Manager, that we had a closure. I
Yes,
didn't understand that.
all right,
And here's the
and-
problem. The greater good for the greater number. That's how democracy is. I mean, do we close an alley that's been in existence for God knows how long without one incident because somebody gets beer bottles thrown in their yard? Wow. Okay? I'm sorry. I mean, you know, if I had, look, if I had, and anybody here had, you know, we could close a street because somebody threw trash in our front yard and so forth and so on, then we, the bottom line is, if there's one person that's affected and, you know, there's 10 that it would affect on top to help this one person, you know, I'm sorry, but I don't see the benefit of closing a road. I didn't know this road was closed. I find that very inappropriate, quite frankly. And if there, you know, the last meeting we had, Mr. Eads, we keep putting these things on the agenda and talking about the same thing over and over and over and over. The bottom line is, we had this discussion, we had individuals come up here, what do? We pull off to another place if some other traffic's on the road. Has there ever been an accident? Remember that question, gentlemen? I asked that question. Answer, no. I mean, this is,
Bring the
you know,
chamber to order. We'll ask you to leave the chamber.
okay, I mean, one of the concerns was the natural gas atmosphere, and that's been resolved, which is the most dangerous circumstance. You buy a house right on the road, guess what? There's something called assumption of the risk. Okay? You know what you're getting when you buy it. Sorry. So do you basically impose your will on every individual that has benefited from this road for 60 years? Me, I don't think it's appropriate. Sorry. That's how democracy works. Greater good for the greater number. That's my position. Right or wrong, that's my position. Now, you know, I mean, really, do we need to have you stand up here and this is where we are. You've done what we asked you to do. They've agreed to, Atmos Energy's agreed to do what we asked them to do, which I figured they would, without it costing the taxpayers anything, and so forth and so on. We can put a light there, yellow, red, if we have to do that. We can do something for traffic coming up to Texas, perhaps. But coming down, you have free access if you're on Texas going down Candy Alley, okay? There's ways to alleviate this concern. There's no use coming here and debating and getting fusses and fights about it. The bottom line is greater good for the greater number, period. That's how I see it. And if we could stop everyone from throwing beer bottles in all of our property anytime because we put some kind of, we close a road, then jeepers creepers, there's nowhere to go unless you have a horse. And people don't ride horses these days, okay? So my position is we open this road back up that should never have been shut down in the first place. and deal with the circumstances. I mean, realistically, we are really, Mr. City Manager, we're wasting a lot of time on the same old, and it's getting a little old. This is the same discussion. You go back and look at the last council meeting. These are the same council discussions repetitively. Now, we're here to, if you're saying we're here to educate the public, if they can't get this any more than we can get it, then we've got a problem. Okay? I mean, you keep putting the same thing over here and over here and over here, and I wonder why we have meetings that take 2.5 hours, because we're repeating history. So, you know, if we're going to have a vote on Candy Alley, let's do it right now.
Well, one, I don't think it's appropriate to have a vote yet. I think since the owner of Candy Alley's here, you need to at least give her the opportunity to speak before you make a vote. I will discuss this individually, just like I said previously. I understand that you and maybe other council members are tired of seeing the same items on the agenda, but at the same time, there's been times when I've had items on the agenda and there's been a council member who is asked to leave early and table those items to move to the next agenda. And then, as we saw in the debt restructuring, there was absolutely no consensus. In order to do something like a debt restructuring, I've got to have some sort of consensus to go forward. And we have to have these discussions. I know it takes time. You may not like it, but we have to have these hard discussions in order to come to a consensus so we can move this city forward and quit looking backwards. And that's what I intend to do, is to continue to look forward and move this city forward. And sometimes we have to have these discussions on numerous occasions so that everyone's on the same page, so the council's on the same page and the citizens are on the same page. So all because we've had a discussion item on here twice or 3 times. And probably one of those times it was tabled. So
Other council members want to comment on Candy Alley?
If I understood you right, Mr. Eads, then after we hear from the owner, you will kind of take the pulse of council regarding this, and you can open that back up without us having to take any action.
I do have that authority.
Okay, because like I say, that's the concern that the residents that live over through there have expressed is, and if the desire of council is to close it, then we need to close it, but I don't know that is, and I know they're kind of frustrated that the road's closed and nothing's going on, and winter's coming. And so that's where if we could expedite that somehow, but I understand wanting to listen to all sides
I think after tonight's meeting, I'll know where council
Well,
wants
that's
to go.
almost like eminent domain without due process of law, is how I see this. I mean, realistically, you've had a taking of property without due process of law. You know, you've closed the road unilaterally.
It's a city road.
Well, okay, whatever. Bottom line is, there has to be due process of law. You've actually unilaterally, Mr. City Manager, you have unilaterally exercised eminent domain over a road of our citizens.
Eminent domain requires a taking from a private citizen, and the city owns the road, so it's not a taking from a private citizen.
Okay, all right.
Would it be appropriate for me to ask, since he's in the audience, to hear what the city engineer has to say about the road?
I think it'd be very appropriate.
I would like to hear what he has to say about it in his comments.
Yeah, it's Wallace McCulloch, city engineers. Jay Dietrich and Michael Main, the 3 of us went out there just to look at the situation and just try to decide what we felt like was best. And we wrote a recommendation to the city manager that we felt like, because of the proximity of the house to the road and the narrowness of the road, we felt like it was in the best interest to close the road. Because the house is maybe 3 feet from the edge of pavement. The pavement itself is 10 feet wide, which is a single lane road. It's not 2-way, it's single lane. And so we felt like it was best to close it because of the closeness. Cars could run into the house if they, if they weren't careful, which they've run into the fence, and so it has happened. I don't know that anybody's actually gone into her house. We gave as an alternate that we felt like that if you didn't want to close it, then the best alternative from that is to make it one-way exiting, and that we put up a guardrail to protect her house. Because there's still the opportunity that a driver, if he's not careful, or if he's had too much to drink or whatever, or he's texting, he runs into the house if there's no protection there. It's just, typically, the house would never have been built like that, but it's an existing house, it's where it is. But because of that close proximity, it just creates a danger that we felt like that's why we recommended closure.
Well, would you agree with me, sir, that coming off King Mill Pike, I guess it would be southbound toward the Kingtown area, right around the curve where actually I live, but there's some apartments built below the road, that there would be a danger. I mean, if you want to talk about what might happen, potentially someone could be drunk or flying, and actually, even though there's a guardrail there, actually land on one of the apartments that's down there. You know what I'm talking about? Down below the thing.
Yeah, and down further. I know what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Okay. I mean, that's a potential danger. It could happen.
Yeah,
Can we
but
protect against every potential?
There's a picture that kind of gives you an idea.
I understand, but I'm asking you, we can't protect against everything by closing roads, this, and
No,
this.
you weigh the things out, try to figure out what's the biggest loss. It's a cost versus impact or whatever. So you got to weigh the things against each other to try to decide which ones.
But they bought this house, nothing's changed. I mean, the road hasn't moved closer to them. This was in existence at the time they purchased it. In fact, my guess is when they purchased this home, that there was actually more traffic because the population of the city of Bristol, Virginia was probably more than it is today. So realistically, it's like, you know, if you've got a pig farm in the county, for instance, and there's a smell from the pigs, but you buy and then you turn around and you complain because there's a smell of pig manure, right? So do you complain after the fact, after you assume the risk and so forth and so on? The answer is no. You have no right to. You come to the nuisance. If there's a nuisance here, the owners of the property came to the nuisance. The nuisance didn't go to them. If there is a nuisance, this has been in existence longer than I've been alive. Period. No one's been killed that I'm aware of. I don't know, I haven't heard that anybody's ever been actually injured. But yeah, we can protect this one house with a guardrail. We can do X, Y, or Z. But you know, I'm going to want a guardrail at my condo to protect me and so forth and so on from possible dangers, or maybe a fence for possible dangers. I mean, the taxpayers should pay me. I mean, I've paid taxes for a long time. I chose to live where I live. But you can't protect against every conceivable issue. You can't, sir.
No, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
You can.
Okay.
So, Mr. Wingard, you got questions of the engineer?
Well, no, I just wanted his input.
Okay.
And,
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
I do want to ask, you talk about how narrow that road is, but it's my understanding if you block that off, that you would send all that down Coral Alley behind East End Christian Church back down to Rhode Island.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
what comes out like, would that road that it would go down not even be a smaller road than the one that's currently existing? And you would have traffic coming both ways on that road?
They're both very narrow roads. There's no question.
I can tell you that Coral Alley's a lot narrower than Candy Alley.
All right.
And then you have more traffic, and then it's sloped more, Mr. Hartley,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken. And then when it snows and so forth, that's going to be one of the last areas to probably get snow removal, and people have to go to work. So you're going to run the risk of more accidents on the place you call, I can't think of the name, Coral
Island.
Okay?
I mean, those alleyways, probably in some, they really ought to be made one way because they're too narrow for two-way traffic. And that's
Okay.
just the reality. In this case, if two cars meet each other on that, they're actually pulling off into her driveway so that the car can get around it.
Isn't that the truth, though, of every alley in the city of Bristol,
Sure.
Virginia?
No, it
It's
is.
basically, I mean, can you tell me an alley in the city of Bristol, Virginia that is a two-lane alley?
No, they're all very narrow.
Okay.
But a lot of them
That's what I
have
thought.
grass that you can pull off and pass on. And the thing about it is that they're really intended for a small group of people to use. This has become a thoroughfare in a sense, and it should never have happened, but it has. I mean, it's just a reality.
But it's residents, right, sir? I mean,
Yeah,
would you
no, it
agree
is,
it's the
but
residents?
But it's an entire neighborhood as opposed to like 10 homes on an alleyway. This is like 60 homes that are using this road. And it was never intended for that. And I'm just, this is just what it is. I mean, y'all can
It
make
is
the
what it is, sir, and I agree with
yeah.
you. But here's what I say. I mean, you know, I have property that adjoins 2 alleys.
Right?
So if this goes through, then I come and petition this council to close those alleys. Because guess what? People throw trash in my back of my law office and a piece of property that we own, and across the street they throw trash in there in the other alley. In fact, one particular person that has adjoining property parks his vehicle and blocks the alley. So if we do this, then do I not have a right to ask for closure of the alleys that adjoin property that I own?
Sure, you can
Okay,
ask for
and
closure.
if they don't do that, then, you know, have you not basically discriminated against my request? Because it's no real different circumstance.
Right.
I mean, you don't disagree with that?
No, you
I
can
can
request
petition,
closure for.
that's right. And the same department that said it needed to be closed at in any alley in the city of Bristol would be required to basically say it's one lane, you have to pull over and so forth if there's traffic, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, has there ever been a traffic meter placed in to determine the daily traffic on that?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
What is
did
it?
track.
And I think maybe they mentioned it last time. I'm sorry if they didn't. If they did.
I think it was about 110 each way.
What I remember is like 160 going out, 120 coming in.
Okay, yeah.
160 going out and 120 coming in.
No, I'm not, I mean, I'm just trying to get us,
No,
you know, I mean, see
you
the
just
whole
need
picture.
to get a feel
Yeah.
for it so y'all can make your decision, so. Any other questions?
We'll have public comment here in a second.
Okay.
You can get up. Appreciate that.
All right, thank
sir.
you.
Thank you, sir.
All right, any other council comments on this item? So I think city manager's gonna, we'll listen to the resident that lives there and then, go away and
Yeah.
see what the timeline is of putting the bollards in and remove the restriction until we decide by council
And-
vote what to do.
Just a comment, since I am on the Transportation Committee, I had no idea that we were all powerful. I thought recommendation was to come to council, let it be closed after you guys hash it around, but not to close it until then.
Amen.
In other words, recommend, yes, I voted to recommend it be closed, but I didn't have all the facts like we have now. So I don't want, and I don't blame you because you have the right to do it, but obviously we get in trouble when we do it without council voting first on the street closure.
I'm assuming it's going to be reopened until we decide.
I would hope so until we actually come up with a vote.
I think the
Well,
recommendation of
I think it's
council is to
important
reopen it until we decide
to
what
listen
to do.
to the citizen tonight, and then I'll
Yeah,
gauge
okay.
interest after that.
Okay.
All right, next item, is charter changes.
Council, I'm just going to make this real quick. We've discussed charter changes. I plan on putting these on the next agenda. One will be the procurement policy, that we follow the state procurement policy. 2 is the cash reserve amount. We think it's probably appropriate to keep $10 million in cash reserve. And then 3, change the IDA over to an EDA. And then 4, which is the fourth item is one I have the most concern about, and about how we necessarily do it. And that's how do we limit our debt in the future so that we don't end up in the situation that we're in right now. What I don't want us to do is be in a position to immediately be in violation of the charter as soon as we pass this charter change and it gets adopted by the legislature. So I'm trying to work on several different scenarios that I can present to you all in order to satisfy your concerns with the debt. I'll be quite honest, I don't think we're going to be able, I couldn't in good conscience recommend that we put a debt limit of, 50 million or something at this time. I just don't think that would be appropriate because we would be in
Wouldn't be
violation.
effective for about 25 years.
Right. So I've got to find a balancing test that will satisfy all the concerns that council has and that citizens have to present to you. So I'm still trying to tweak that to figure out exactly how we can make that work. Just wanted to give you a quick update on that, and that's all I have.
There was a vote here recently. I guess it was on election day. Was it Lee County? Was one of the counties had on a referendum?
Lee County had a school referendum
Yeah,
in
school
order
referendum was on the Lee County.
it's $47.2 million. The citizens voted
down.
not to borrow,
90%.
90%.
not to borrow
It was huge.
$47.2
So
million.
I think
Barely,
the
but
way
Still not a lot of votes
Yeah.
in Lee County.
I think the way you write it or it reads would be any new debt considered by the municipality.
Well, and I think what we have to be concerned about too is potential for operating debt. Assume we have a fire truck that goes completely out and we need to borrow $1 million or $1.5 million to buy a new fire truck, or if there's some sort of expense that comes up that we haven't budgeted for, we've got to be careful that we don't hamstring ourselves from being able
Talking
to
about
operate.
major borrowing,
Right.
not the
Yeah.
minor
You know,
stuff.
and-
25 million and up would be
So
a
I'm thinking,
major.
I'm thinking a limit, anything below 15 million, 10 to 15 million, we could do as we've always done, but I think anything over 10 to 15 million, because 10 to 15, anything less than 15 million would allow us to be able to borrow to get any sort of operating expense that we would need. And I can't imagine that we would ever need to go out and borrow 15 million for just an operating type of expense. So, mainly what we've seen, and this council knows, is what we've typically borrowed for is for enterprise type fund situations, landfill, falls. And when we've borrowed for those situations, it's been big money. And that's something that, I think this council and citizens want addressed in the future, and that's what I'm gonna try to find a solution for.
Maybe you write the charter change as enterprise funds require a certain type approval. And
Correct.
it gets the city out of the
Referendum
business of setting up enterprises.
Yeah, I think there's ways, I mean, that's one of my concerns is that you have the flexibility if you need a fire truck or something, but it's the big money that's, the big borrows that's gonna get us in trouble. And, that at a certain level, maybe instead of a simple majority, you need a super majority. Maybe it's a referendum. Just some kind of thing that slows the process down, gets input from the public, and makes sure that you don't real hastily jump into something and we find ourselves in a similar situation. I think that's what everybody wants to make sure never happens again. And how you write that in such a way that it meets the requirements of the charter and state law is a whole different matter.
Well,
But
I can't believe sitting here that the state legislators would not want to draft something to hold the municipalities in the state to some kind of a threshold, because their credit rating and their financial stability is based on how the cities execute. And they know there's been cases now where they've had to step in, and so they should have, the environment should say, we need to do something. We just can't sit here and let Petersburg, Virginia go to the path they did. And
that's the threshold's 10%. That's of your.
obviously that hadn't solved the problem.
I know, but
right?
I mean that. But there is a threshold. Now, whether they need to go back and revise that's a issue for the legislature to consider.
And Mr. Hartley, my concern's always been that if we do a charter change, like I said before, realistically, 5 years down the road, there can be a city council that says, hey, we want to spend more people's money. I mean, that's the only thing. I mean, we're just basically.
And to me, that's fine. Just make it to where they have to stand up in the public and make the vote and change it, because the charter says you shouldn't do that. So at least it becomes a publicly visible thing that gets a lot of activity. So just, make it hard. Don't make it easy on the next councils, make it hard.
Public participation is critical.
Yes.
Yeah.
The falls was done in public, except nobody was there to hear it, except Ms. Marnie.
I don't think it was advertised very well by the people that should have, the media, with all respect, Mr. McGee. I don't think the Herald Courier, I think the Herald Courier's complicit in what happened at the falls. That's my opinion.
I think it's Mr. McGee's fault.
No, I'm not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying, I think that, I just don't think it was explained well enough to the people exactly what was involved. Well, but I don't read the Herald Courier, so, that's, just to be honest with you.
You mind calling me up and tell me what you're
I
writing?
read the funny papers, and I do read sports. I think that's pretty good, and horoscopes and so forth, to know exactly what's going to happen to me tomorrow and so forth and so on. Beyond that, that's the extent of it. I do read obituaries occasionally to see if somebody I know's died, and unfortunately, there's a lot of those that are dying, unfortunately. But I don't know that the public, if they did read it, sir, and I apologize, I like to read the stories. If they did do it, then people either didn't understand. I know Miss Marnie was involved and came down to a lot, but Miss Marnie's always involved, with all respect. I just wish we had like 200 of you that were involved and so forth and so on, and got the word out, because we wouldn't be in the mess we're in right now, I don't
Well, I
think.
told her the mistake she made, and she didn't go up and grab the wood podium and come here and break it right here on the council. That's what should have happened.
And she was younger, and she could have done that more in that day, you know, a few years ago, so shame on you. But yeah.
Okay, so moving on, we'll keep moving the
Can I ask
discussion
one
forward. Yeah.
quick- Mr. Eads, if we take all this up at the next meeting, we still have time to get our delegate to pre-file the changes?
Yes, he said as long as we get it to him really before the end of December, so
Okay.
we'll have it.
But we good on the APA, asking the APA under the, make sure that we're on.
There are certain requirements that APA has. I'm not sure if we can get there, but if we need to get Delegate Quinn involved, we'll do that as well.
Very good, thank you, sir.
Okay. All right, next item is G, which is matters to be presented by members of the public. First person, Aaron Lilly.
My name's Aaron Lilly, developer, builder here in Bristol. We've built, like, I think I counted up the other day, 360 some homes in the last few years. We'd like to build another 400. I was just reading your sign up there, it says Bristol's a good place to live. July a year ago, the AARP came out and said that Bristol was one of the top 10 in the nation. Great place to retire and a good place to live. I agree with them. I've watched all of your past, I watched the last 4 or 5 council meetings. Took me a while to do that, 2 or 3 weeks. The meek will inherit the earth, but you're not sitting up on the podium right now, so that's a good thing. Something has changed. As far as the business community, I've been trying to get a subdivision approved for 18 months, and all I know is some of the council members got involved, and I don't know who you are, but someone contacted the city manager a week ago, and today I got my building permits, and so we hope to build at least 400. It's the last piece of multifamily property, the largest piece of multifamily property that's zoned that way in Bristol, Virginia. And I want to thank you. I want to thank you. Whoever you are that got involved, I want to thank you. I don't know who you are, but I do appreciate it. And the business community does need your help, each one of you's help. Sometimes it's getting something passed is like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's very painful at times, very costly. But I'm really bullish on Bristol, Virginia. I don't mind to tell you that. You've got an advantage from a business standpoint. Your tax difference between here and Bristol, Tennessee is the reason we buy all of our building materials in Bristol, Virginia, and not Bristol, Tennessee. And I think you've got some advantages that's never brought up, but they're true, they're real. That 5% difference in the taxes that business people pay, you pay, is a big advantage. And Bristol, Virginia is a great place to live. And we're starting our first solar subdivision sometime next week. And I just want to come tonight and thank you for your help. Something has changed. Whoever, whatever, let it continue. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next person on the list was Mr. Johns. Going once, going twice. Okay, next person, Victor Smith.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the council. My name is Victor Smith. I live at 169 Chester Hill Road. I have a flash drive here with 4 pictures on it I would like for you to see. Can that be projected for you?
No, we don't let stuff be projected during public comment. You could print it out and hand it out for,
I wasn't sure whether you could show them.
I mean, that's unusual.
You can give it to city manager, and he can send it to us.
You can give it to city manager and he can send it to us via email.
Is there a password on it? No. Okay. Just one file? Okay. I'll send it on. Maybe
Just one
if you'll
more.
wait a few minutes, I'll go upstairs and take care of it in just a second, and I'll give you this back.
You can go ahead and talk about it right now if you'd like. Kind of help. Go, I'll send it, I'll get it sent out to council, but go ahead and explain your situation and I'll send it out to you.
Actually, the pictures tell the story. It has to do with trash collection. I have a neighbor that likes to put our trash out the day after the collection, and it sits there all week. And we have 3 mailboxes because there's a right-of-way, and there's 2 other neighbors that live on the right-of-way, and we all have a mailbox in the same place. The trash is out on the street, not in back of the curb, and one of the pictures that I have, I just took today, that neighbor just now put the trash out, and we had trash pickup this morning. Now, it's going to sit there all week unless somebody complains and the city sends a truck over to vacuum it up. It's grass and mostly leaves and whatnot. But my picture that I took shows my truck coming up the way I would come up to the mailbox in order for me to pick my mail up from the driver's side. Now the trash is in my way, and I can't get to the mailbox without getting out of the truck to get my mail. Also, this trash blocks the mailman from being able to continue his trip to the next mailbox, which is very close to our mailboxes. And he has to back up and pull around and pull into that other mailbox. Now, I've worked in the post office a long time ago, and I do know that the mailman has rules and regulations. He does not have to get out of his vehicle to deliver your mail. He does not have to back up to continue on his trip. But my mailman is my neighbor, so I talk to him quite a bit. He's very, very good about delivering the mail, even though this trash is in his way to obstruct his driving. Okay, this is the picture I took today, this evening. You can see just beyond it, there's 3 mailboxes, and there's the road just beyond there is the right-of-way to the Brown House and 2 others, and one of them is mine. Now, I took this picture and I placed my truck so that it shows the direction and how I'd have to get to my mailbox to get my mail without having to get out of my truck. And you can see it's a pretty good sized pile. And that was put up about a day after the trash pickup. Now, this is happening rather frequently. This happened today. This morning, trash was picked up, and here we are with a bunch of trash waiting for pickup next week.
Well, thank you, Mr. Smith. We'll have the city manager check on the ordinance and see if it's within the ordinance or not of trash pickup, and get back to you. Okay?
Okay, that's what my purpose was, here to be here with you this evening.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know there is an ordinance for the time you should have your trash can out and when you should put it back in, and it's not a week long, I can tell you that much.
I've read that ordinance, that you're not supposed to put it out before the afternoon of the day before pickup,
Right,
and you must remove your trash barrel by the evening of the same day.
that's correct.
His address
Thank
is
you.
169 Chester Hill Road. All right, next person, Michael Pollard.
Thank you, gentlemen of the council. It's also my understanding that while lawn debris is actually technically a different category than trash, it's my understanding that it's not supposed to be set on the street but alongside the street. That also might help his issue, but the homeowner may not be aware of that. I would like to mention to Mr. Lilly that the Planning Commission has quickly approved everything that he has brought, as soon as he's brought it, because we think it's a great idea. But what I actually came about this evening is actually signed up concerning the council discussion items. And one of the items that was brought up prior to, as part of item C, it looked like we may have eliminated our TAN balance. Is that correct?
Right now, the city has not borrowed from the TANs, and we're hoping that we will not have to borrow. It's not set in stone yet, but this may be the first time in a number of years that the city will not have to borrow from the TAN.
Do we currently have a zero balance on the
Yes.
TAN? That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, there is two other folks. Judy Murray. Patty Thomas. So Judy Murray going once, going twice. Patty Thomas.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I am here on behalf of Candy Alley. My house sits on Texas Avenue, and it faces it. And this place that hadn't had any accidents very much has. And sometimes the cars come through there so fast, and in the wintertime especially, they slide all over, and they have hit my vehicle sitting in front of my house and knocked the mirrors off continuously. I've replaced them 4 times. I've had a hit and run, and I live on the opposite corner. It's not a corner really. There's a corner where I live, and it was taken out by the garbage truck. The new garbage truck hit my wall, and I had to replace it because they didn't want to take, credit for it. But anyway, back to the thing that's at hand, and that is that as a neighbor, with what's going on, with what I've seen myself, cars come through there and they pull over in front of her house, and there is no place there for them to pull over. That should be her driveway in the front, but they pull over there, and sometimes they almost hit head on right there, and it's not very far apart. And then they will go on down through there, but you've got them coming in and out and coming up through there, speeding. And in the wintertime, like I said, their cars are all over the road, and they come over the hill, flying from down there on the corner, round from where the schoolhouse is. They come down through there off that hill, and they fly. And they come up through there making a speedway out of it sometimes. And I myself have witnessed accidents. So, they put in signs up through there, put the speed limit for the school. They don't go by that. And they're talking about closing Highland View. When they close that, they ain't even gonna go by that sign no longer. And that's on the pole where she lives. But my concern is, yes, I have seen what happens at her house.
Your
The
time's up.
rail is so close.
Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, I think that was the last person that signed up on the list. Since Nancy Marnie, I don't see her name on here, but I see her hand. I'll write your name on the list. Please come up quickly.
There it is.
What's that?
Threat.
I think Mr. Johnson wants to
Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Nancy Marney. I'm a resident of the city of Bristol, Virginia. I'm a property owner. I will make comments on two things that I have heard tonight. Number one, there was a discussion just a few minutes ago about the falls. Mr. McGee and I go back a very, very long way. I will say very briefly, in terms of clarification, the discussion about, yes, I was there. Believe me, I was there big time. And the discussions that took place were just a matter of being required by law. And I know that I made a statement at one of the meetings one night. We didn't need a train station. We had no use for a train station because the railroading was being done in the council meetings.
For the record, that's funny. I mean, that's funny.
And the reason it's funny, it's a fact also. But nonetheless, I made the statement, I stand by it, and I make it again tonight. Now, one of the things that occurred, and you all have brought up the fact about how much discussion and this and that and the other, there was a Freedom of Information charge brought against one of the principals in that Falls project, and it was supported. It was valid, it was supported, and that's that. I can discuss that privately anytime you wish. It was rubber stamped. They didn't want anybody's opinion. They didn't. It was all done behind the scenes, rubber stamped. That's why you're saying open discussion. There wasn't any. It was only what was required by the law. That is my opinion. David was there too. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. All right, now, another thing that I think Mr. Fleener was exactly on target tonight in terms of the food tax. Now, I have personally discussed this food tax with the manager at the Cracker Barrel, at Ruby Tuesdays, at Logan's, to McDonald's, and I don't even know where else now. I think at some point several years ago, even at Shoney's. And they all have said exactly the same thing. The food tax, the Bristol food tax is too high, and it runs people's bills up. A friend of mine who can well afford to eat anywhere desirable, anywhere, any place, anytime, made the statement, you know, you order your food and you think your bill's going to be one thing, and by the time they add all the state of Virginia tax and the city tax and the hot food and the cold food and the takeout and all that, it has run your bill way up.
Thank you, Ms.
And
Marney.
my point is,
Your time's up, Ms. Marney. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I finish my statement?
Your time's up.
I'm going
Ms.
to do it
Marney.
anyway, you know that.
Thank you, Ms. Marney.
But
Thank you, Ms. Marney.
you're welcome, Mr. Mayor. But I will support what Mr. Fleener said. It is a very big problem. It is an ongoing problem, and it's costing us money, and I don't like that. I like Bristol. I don't want it to cost us money. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
I appreciate your kindness.
Last person, Karen Foote.
We've got a bunch of disabled here. Hi, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Hello.
I'd like for y'all to know some of the facts before you form an opinion on the alley. I didn't request it closed. I never requested it closed, for one. Has nothing to do with trash, and I worry about people that have to worry about trash. Gas lines run all the way down the side of that house. My home has been hit twice. Not almost, not maybe, it has been hit twice. I have claim numbers for you to look up if you'd like to at a later date. I won't go into all of it. My fence has been hit both ways, coming and going. I did request a guardrail, but then we found out that a guardrail is made to give. It has nowhere to give but into my home. I bought the fence over and over and over again. My husband died in February. About March the 5th or so, ring at 2 a.m. in the morning, someone hit my fence again. I can't keep worrying about it. The two things you're wanting to put near my gas meter, I have torn that section of my fence down because of neighbors hitting it, coming out. I've got neighbors hitting my fence coming in. The guardrail's made to give. It's only going to give into my home or Gene Grubb's telephone poles he has lining his property to keep them out of his yard. I'm not bearing the burden of the cost to the damage to my fence and my home anymore. The city council, the city, whoever is going to have to take charge of this. How often are you going to be willing to replace a $5,000 guardrail? I did see the last meeting on YouTube. I mean, the cost is just going to cost you. It's going to keep costing you because it's not costing me anymore. I've been damaged over this fence. Mr. Berry, God rest his soul, has hit my fence 3 times in one place. It's right there at the gas meter. He paid me both times to fix the fence. Sears came out and fixed it 2 different times. The 3rd time he hit it, I tore it down. I lost my gate. I have done everything working with my neighbors. I miss the inconvenience, the in and out, it's right there. I live right there. I can go in and out too. But I've been living in terror. I'm telling you, if you don't think you live with gas lines
Okay, your
all
time's up.
down your
Thank you, Ms.
property.
Foot. Thank you.
Well, I need something done, and if you don't do it, I'll have to go through legal action to have it done. I don't want to cost my city.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. But I do hope you understand the importance of this time.
All right,
And
next
I did
item,
not
city manager
request it
comments.
closed.
Council, I know there's been some discussion and maybe some things in the media in regards to the State Street tree plan, and we're working in cooperation with the city of Bristol, Tennessee. As soon as I was appointed interim city manager, Mr. Sawyer reached out to me to discuss the tree situation over on State Street, based upon how this council wants to proceed and be cooperative with its neighbors. Mr. Sawyer and I met and we discussed the situation, and we came to an agreement, and I've also found grant money to cover this expense so it doesn't come out of the city's pocket. The trees for the city of Bristol will cost us $6,484 to be paid for with grant money. We will be starting on the west end of State Street at the corner of State and Commonwealth, and we'll start removing those trees sometime the first week of January. I believe in Bristol is working with the business owners on State Street to determine exactly when the best time for us to start that process would be after the holiday season, but we're thinking it'll be sometime that first week of January. Our city public works employees will be removing those trees, so I know at one point there was an estimate of costing like $40,000. That was based upon the contractor coming in, removing the trees and putting everything back, but the city will be able to take care of 99% of the issues that are going to arise. The only thing that we will not be doing is the landscaper will be planting the trees for us, which will give us a year warranty on every one of those trees. So I just wanted to update council that we are moving forward, trying to be cooperative neighbors with Bristol, Tennessee, and fix State Street because there are issues with those trees, especially in the fall. And we did have recently one tree fell and on a visitor's car and caused some damage to a car because it broke during a storm. But any questions about that?
Yeah, Mr. Eads, bottom line is, has there been an engineering study are we taking these up by the roots, or intending to take these trees up by the roots?
What we're going to do, there is a device that wraps around the root of the tree. It goes down into the ground and you pull it up by the root. Those trees were placed into a metal container when they were planted roughly 30 some odd years ago. I don't anticipate that metal container still being there. It's probably rusted out. What we're hoping for are the roots have been contained and are within basically one long cylinder from that metal container. We don't know what we're going to find yet, but we don't think that, and I will say this, there will be a test tree done. It's going to be that first tree there at the corner of State and can't think of the alley, but it's right up from Commonwealth, and that's kind of going to determine, give us an idea of what sort of damage that there may be, if any, when we pull those trees up.
That's not a cavernous area. The cavernous area is up near Piedmont, for instance. There's like hollow caves underneath part of this going up Piedmont to the first or second block. Now, given your role as dual role right now, have you thought, if we don't have, that we need to do 2 or 3 test sites? Because if you do it at Commonwealth, and don't do it at 2 or 3 other locations, then once you find out at Commonwealth and so forth, and please, because I want a legal opinion that you think that doing this and not doing 2 or 3 different locations, that in the event the road has to be redone, because as you said we hope that the root system is contained. We don't anticipate the metal still being in place. But if we have damage to the road in State Street, who's going to be responsible? How are we absolved? Are we insured? Because if we're not, yeah, we can be a good neighbor all you want to, but if the road gets torn up, then we're in a good bad neighbor issue with Bristol, Tennessee, because whose roots, whose trees, and so forth and so on caused the road damage. So, it's wonderful to say we're going to do 1 test site, but that is the least potential hazard for root damage to the road where you're talking about doing it. You're going to do it, do 2 or 3. And that way we know what we're getting into potentially, rather than just do 1 and say, oh, everything's great.
Well, and, I think what we have to consider, one, the type of machine that it's going to use, it's going to go down, it'll cut the roots that are there, and we should be able to pull that tree up without causing any damage to any of the surrounding areas. So the best way I can explain it, it's like a post hole digger. It goes around, it wraps down, it cuts down through the dirt, and then it clamps around the root ball, and you can pull that tree up.
Nobody's saying we don't understand the concept that you're talking about. What I'm saying is you're talking about doing 1 tree. Okay, that's what you said. You're going to do 1 tree. My question is, I want a legal opinion, if you're just going to do 1 tree, that Bristol, Virginia would be absolved of any cost and so forth, doing all the trees based on 1 tree being tested. Mr. Eads, you're the attorney as well.
Well, I'll give you the opinion right now. We will not be absolved. If there's damage, we'll have to fix it.
Okay, then,
it's that simple.
And that could be a major issue too. You'd have to admit, if we're talking about fixing.
And if we get into that situation, we can stop. We can stop with that tree. If we find a tree that is going to be causing serious damage to pipes underneath the sidewalk or underneath the road, we don't have to necessarily pull that tree up. We can just cut that tree down and move on. But there's things that we can do to mitigate those damages. I think our Public Works Department is very capable. I think they can mitigate any damages that they can foresee, and we have the funds available to do it. And it's been an issue for quite some time on State Street with those trees. I think it's probably been in the works for a little over 2 years, and now's the time to do something.
Well,
just 2 or 3 sites. Tennessee ought to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And, because there are some really ugly trees down there, that you ought to start with them.
So, Mr. Hubbard, you agree then we don't need to just rely on 1?
I think we need more than 1, for sure.
Absolutely.
That's just my feeling. I have no reason to think that's going to be enough. Even 3 may not be, but if you're saying, hey, if we start getting into, we got to tear up the sidewalk to get this sucker out.
Yeah.
It's going to be one of those things you could do half the trees and not have a problem, and then as soon as you start the other
Well-
half, I mean, there's no, I mean, no.
There's no guarantee,
There's
but
no guarantee.
at least
and
with
you've
3
gotta
shots,
You've
you'd
got
have
to
a-
mitigate it. Public Works knows to mitigate
Yeah.
the situation. And some of the grant funds will be, if we do have to tear up sidewalks, some of those grant funds are available for us to go back in and repair sidewalks. So there are things that we can do where, you know, the cost of the city will be minimal.
But bottom line is, Mr. Hubbard, I think you agree, the bottom line is, and maybe we'll get a consensus of council before you proceed, Ms. Reeves, the realities are, you know, you can't just say we dig this tree up and we find out that, you know, we've hit a root system and so forth and so on, we destroyed pipes, we've got road issues, we've got sidewalk issues, we have no money to fix that. So the prudent course of action would be to do one tree in the middle of, maybe between Piedmont and, I don't know what the next block up is, but
Moore
north.
Street.
Moore Street, okay. I mean,
Or 6th Street in
realistically,
Tennessee.
in the middle of a block, do one at the end of a block and do another one further up. At least do 3. It's almost like a core drilling project. At least you have some idea. But to shoot in the dark based on one site is really not only not prudent, it's actually kind of stupid.
Mr. Fleener, you know, you're sitting here calling me stupid. You're sitting here.
No, you're playing that.
No, I'm not playing that. You're saying that the idea is stupid. What I said was it was a test site, and, you know.
Don't mislead.
We don't need to get into the back and forth.
I mean,
It's not productive.
you know, Mr. Fleener, everybody in this city is doing everything they can to mitigate damages for any situation that would arise. And to sit here and think that we would do something that's going to cause more damage and cost the city more money, I mean, I don't know.
Well, no, you want to do one, and I'm just saying it's stupid to not do 2 or 3. And why wait? And your answer was, now you can say I'm calling you stupid. I don't think if you play it back that I said you're stupid, Mr. Reeves, but it sounds good to play me off and say that, okay? It's really kind of childish, but in my opinion, I think that's childish, and I don't think it's unfair. But what I'm saying is, why get into the risk when we can mitigate the risk now, okay? I mean, instead of doing one site where it's no caverns underneath the ground, do 2 or 3. That's a prudent, and I think I used the word prudent, and to not do it is stupid. Okay? That's what I said. Play it back. Okay?
Well, I don't disagree with what you said. I just took it that you thought my idea was stupid, and
that's how you took it yourself. That's chip.
That's what happens when people get emotional. So.
Yeah, and that's
let's
on the
move
paid employee.
So, any other comments from city manager?
No.
Okay.
We've had another person signed up for public comment.
Oh, come on.
We're past public comment. I'm sorry.
I'm asking to leave.
All right, so we're going to move into executive session.
Leave, Mr. Mayor. I've told you I'm not.
Okay, so Mr. Fleener's going to leave because of his knee.
He's
So
got a
make
knee injury.
that note in the record, in the minutes. All right, so executive session pursuant to 2.2-3711A5 Code of Virginia 1950 as amended. Discussion concerning a prospective business or industry or the expansion of existing business or industry where no previous announcement has been made of the business or industry's interest in locating or expanding its facilities in the community, prospective business, and pursuant to 2.23711.A8 Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel, parentheses, legal matter, and pursuant to 2.23711.A1 Code of Virginia 1950 as amended, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body, parentheses, personnel. Looking for a council motion. And a second.
I make a motion, we go into executive session.
I will second that.
Please call the roll.
Fleener.
Abstain.
Hartley.
Yes.
Hubbard.
Yes.
Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. By roll call vote, council members certify that only business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as specified in the motion to convene the executive session were discussed. Clerk, call the roll.
Hartley.
Yes.
Hubbard. Wingard.
Yes.
Mumpower.
Yes. And with that, I certify executive session and I adjourn the November 14th Marathon City Council meeting.